this is the benefit of all the audience. Again, we would like to introduce Radhika. Radhika heads KPMG WFM team. She has good number of team members in India. She's based out of Delhi, India. Radhika has worked for companies like Sapient, NTT, Reliance, Avid, Deloitte, and now in KPMG. What Radhika is known for, uh, Radhika is known for business management, which is a workforce management. She has built in very innovative WFM um, processes and innovation in in KPMG and WFM strategy building and also building COE Center of Excellence. And I don't know how many of you know, last year Radhika was the one got Best Practices Award, also Best Tool Award, one of the Best Tool Awards. Tomorrow Radhika is presenting our updated version of WFM tool, which is internally made, something that not used any of the external sources. It's something that made it relevant to KPMG suited business model, which is going to be presented tomorrow. I encourage all of you to join this tomorrow's best practices series in the morning, which should start at 8:30, 9 o'clock. Till 1 o'clock, we have 12 companies participating. Radhika is one of them. Wish you all the best, Radhika, again.
Thank you.
What else Radhika is known as, like she's a good people manager and one of the people that making the WFM relevant to the business. I see that a lot of WFM heads and the leaders, maybe from great companies, but what is important for us is as a WFM professional or WFM leader, making ourselves relevant to the business need and building innovations around is something very important. As it is said that it may be a great practice for XYZ company, it may not be relevant to our organization. So it's very important that making it relevant within the organization and benchmarking is something very important. So Radhika has done a wonderful job bringing innovation in KPMG. With this, I hand over the presentation back to Radhika. Radhika is going to talk about leading WFM practices across business models. This is something that is a very unique topic. All right.
Let me know if you can see.
All right, we all can see. Go ahead, Radhika.
Yes, you can see.
We'll take the questions.
Yes.
Audience, please raise your hand, and also if you could type any questions in the chat box, you could do that. All right. Over to you, Radhika.
All right. Thank you, Shiva. All right. So we've spoken enough about so much that we have done pre-COVID, post-COVID. How do we have a BCP? How do we move on, etc. Gig economy. So it's been a day full of very heated, very heavy conversations. I'm going to keep it short. I'm going to keep it quick. I think we must have discussed quite a few of these things already, but this is a different perspective. And like Shiva said, it's very customized or tailored to a professional services firm like ours. And that is why it sits across businesses, across models. So I'll just walk you through how we have done this in KPMG. So, the first thing, and if you don't have some background, very quickly, in KPMG, we are fairly young WFM process, and we're just about 5 years old or so. We started as a small group, but we've now become big, and we rolled it out across businesses. So the next thing we had to do is we had to upgrade ourselves or change ourselves to manage different dynamics, which helped us improve efficiency and obviously reduce costs, which is actually the need of the hour at this point in time, and manage with what we have internally and for at least this given period of time. The focus obviously had to be different. It had to be new because the situations were new. It was not business as usual. And like somebody said, it's business as unusual. So that is how it was. So the few things that we were earlier calling it as challenges or earlier were probably the regular issue that would come was actually a situation to live by now. And these were some of the biggest things that we were facing on a daily basis, which was of course changing business models. We couldn't go back to what originally the way we were working earlier, where everything was like you wanted to meet a client, you get into a flight, go meet them, have that discussion, come back, have people specifically within that location where you're having a project, etc. All of that was changing, and all of that was probably changing for good or for a long period of time. We obviously had, and like everybody else, the entire industry or entire corporate world has had the cost saving pressures, because only if you have cash in hand can you live or survive another day. So this was really a key thing for us to focus on, but at the same time not take drastic measures as well. Virtual working had become a reality because so KPMG was always open to virtual working earlier as well. We had a defined work from home model as well. It was very supportive for various kinds of situations to people, but suddenly everybody was working from home, everybody. So this was the new normal. And so how did we handle that, and how could we do exactly what we were doing or better with this kind of business model? Of course, there was controlled hiring, not like no hiring, but obviously reduced hiring, because naturally we had to focus on, do we really need to hire? Did we? And even if we had to hire, we wanted to see that if we hire, we bring on people, but do we actually have that kind of work? Because what if the client has kind of put a hold on it, and kind of the client has delayed the work and they are not giving us, then it was really no point hiring at that point in time. And of course the lack of human connect, because this was something that was not there in consulting firms earlier. Everybody always met everybody. If you wanted to discuss something, you preferred to have a meeting face to face versus calling up somebody. That's how consulting worked. So this was one big challenge also. And ambiguity, because there was no clarity as to how long and for how many months, how many people, what would happen, which business would get impacted, etc. There was a lot of ambiguity. I mean, you could only forecast with the best of best guesses you could take, but how far would that guess come across was just a matter of question. So we had to prepare for the unknown, obviously, because we didn't know what was coming. And like I said, we could guess and we could forecast based on our estimated guesses and the best of what we were hearing outside, but we also had to prepare and gear up for the unknown. So we had to take our entire process to the next level, because frankly, what we were doing, which we were doing pretty well, wasn't enough for a situation like this, because this was not a usual situation. It was obviously different and unprecedented. I spoke about this earlier as well. Collaboration was the biggest key. And the support function collaborations was really important, because they were the ones who were actually connected with everybody. So the resource management team was working very closely with HR, with hiring, with exits, and with L&D, which was very important at this point in time, because we couldn't work as separate teams anymore. We couldn't have a separate goal. We couldn't have a separate purpose. We had to all pool in and get together to work as one team, more so now, because that was the need of the hour. Because when we had a goal of upskilling and reskilling, how does L&D do that if they don't know who to upskill, when to upskill, how to upskill, which people, which levels, which kind of trainings should we be giving? So it had to be in collaboration with the resource management team, with the hiring team, with the exits as well, because we were actually, I know that we said that there were exits, attrition had dropped, but at the same time, there were a lot of people who were working a lot, and there was work overload. So we saw that attrition happen as well. But at the same time, we thought that because there was so much of load, because people were also not just working for office, but they were also working in their personal lives when there were no domestic help available, there was no additional help available. They had to do more at home. There was no daycares, no schools, so children were at home. The parents had to focus on kids and at home and work. So it was terrible. Workload balancing was the need of the hour again, because, and it was not just, workload balancing from an official perspective, but also otherwise. We saw a lot of men who in India think that they were not probably supposed to be doing work like mopping and cleaning in the kitchen. There was this happening as well. And there was a lot of discussion that was happening internally, where there was, okay, I'm just going to bring this up so that I can discuss it quickly. So there was also a lot of support internally available, because the HR team was doing a phenomenal job, where they were connecting with a lot of people internally to see if they're healthy, they're safe, the mind-body collaboration is going on. So all of that was happening in a very, very collaborated manner. The next thing, of course, was systems integration. Everybody had to upgrade their systems. We had to make sure that in a business like ours, there was, all risk compliances were taken care of. There was no threats. The data was not being leaked. Nobody was copying data, which is confidential, etc. So a lot of very focused attention was given to these kinds of things. There was the need of the hour for the standardization, because we realized that while we had customized it for each business, it was also important to standardize things, because we couldn't have each business function in a way that they have always been functioning, which is different from or entirely cut off from different groups. So there had to be some seamless standardization where we could use that, okay, probably the resumes or the skill tagging that we have, it has to be in a certain way. So a lot of that focus went into it as well. Reporting and metrics were standardized, and a lot of best practices were shared from one group to the other. Everything was almost everything was automated, because I think people got more ideas when they were sitting at home, because they realized that, oh, I'm spending so much time doing this manually. It would have been easier if things were automated, because everything was required, and the tips now and everything was required to be done from home. There was no additional help. So automation was obviously the key at that point in time. And IT upgradation, we had to upgrade our server spaces, our, for that matter, even our internets. And the firm was very supportive of rolling out, some support for people who didn't have very good connections. They could buy and it would get reimbursed and stuff. So it was the fantastic collaboration that happened. It was all brought in together to cater to something like this. We had an increased focus on various other things as well. Like I said, we assessed internal skills. Now, this was really important, because if we didn't, just tagging a person to a skill, or somebody saying, I have XYZ skill, that is one thing. But to know the extent of training that the person can provide, a person can do, or to the extent that the person can actually work, that was really, really important. So we had to assess skills in a very different way. We had to tag them in a very different way. We had a lot of focus on it, and we also saw which were the overlapping skills sitting across groups, because there were some skills which could have been used across groups, and that became our fungible pool, because we could utilize somebody sitting from one group to move to the other, or help it for short-term project in the other group versus going and hiring, which otherwise would have been the case. Location data. So I spoke about this in the panel earlier, that This really helped us because we had created a bot and we did surveys every week, and some actually twice a week is what we're supposed to fill the survey, where we had the information for everybody as to where were they sitting, at what location, what was the pin code, are they safe or not, have they come in contact with anybody or not, etc. But we use this information of staff sitting in different groups, different locations, different cities, to optimize them for projects which were specific to that location where they could have helped. I mean, obviously you can't put two extreme different people, different projected people, but where there was a possibility, that was leveraged and that worked for some projects, and it was really highly appreciated. So existing capacity was obviously the need of the hour, where we had to leverage the existing capacity. Over here, what we saw is that we were also leveraging our support teams, which otherwise usually fell outside of our purview of allocations and of checking if there's somebody available, because usually you would check within the client group, if business teams, if there were somebody who was a skill match. If not, you would go higher. But here we were also looking at support teams where if people were interested or wanted to move or were open to taking up new things, this was really coming up as a very big handy group. We made the open demands visible, which was a new thing, because earlier what used to happen is that when we had open requirements, it was the resource management team who had a view of it, and they would actually check who's available based on the skills mapping or the levels and locations, etc. But now, when even though the resource management was still doing it, we also opened it up for the business, because here we gave them an opportunity to actually see what all is open, and they can volunteer and say, I have some bandwidth, or I would be interested to move, and I would be interested to take this project up, maybe just the duration of the project, etc. And that would again give them another reskilling opportunity, and another opportunity to do something else. So this really helped us, reduce some of our open demands, which were otherwise open. Reskilling and upskilling is all connected, where once you have this, and there were people who were volunteering, they actually started reskilling. There's a lot of training material created by our L&D team, and a lot of focus on them, where there were certain trainings which were open only for certain levels of people. Like there was a certain training which was open only for a manager or a senior manager, maybe like negotiation skills or something else, I'm talking about soft skills as well as technical skills, but more about soft skills. This time we opened those for certain teams, those kind of trainings for all levels, because we said, why not? Why not? And if somebody has that intent and somebody wants to do a little more, why not? So the certain teams were not restricted to go and attend whichever trainings they wanted. There were while people were working from home and the lockdown was going on in the first phase, even in the second and third phase actually. So there were a lot of work from home trainings that were specially curated for this kind of period and for this kind of scenarios, which were sent as a link, and a lot of people attended that, and that was actually very, very helpful to a lot of people. I'm talking about this internal gig concept, where I said that when they open the demand, people can volunteer, and they can also submit an interest even if there was no demand. So if there was no demand that was matching their interest, they could actually submit an interest or a resume and say, okay, this is something that I'm interested in. If a new demand comes up, please let us know. And we were able to match it. It was all system driven and tool driven, and very little, so it's not like there was no RM intervention at all. So ultimately we had to check the availability, we had to check fitment, we had to get two managers speak about it, but that facilitation was done by the RM, but it was tool driven. I mean, everything was tracked. There was a lot of increased fungibility, even partial staffing. Now, what would happen is that maybe somebody is allocated to a project, but in a consulting world, this happens sometimes, especially at AM and above levels, assistant manager and above levels, where you are not 100% allocated to a project, and you're probably allocated part-time, say 50%, 20%, 10%, etc. We would look at that kind of capacity available and try and allocate that capacity, that extra capacity to other groups and see if people could double hat versus again, checking if there was nobody available and going and looking at the market. This is how we had to change with the changing times. In the first phase of opening our offices and coming back, we did a very robust plan to come back with a 33% categorization, because that is what originally the guidance was, that no firm should be having more than 33% of our people. So we categorized every single person to a category of A, B, C, and put them in 3 leagues. And if somebody could come in week 1, that person could not come to office on week 2 and week 3, because God forbid if somebody would get infected, then the next 14 days the person would be at home, and only the 4th week they could come back. So everybody was tagged to A, B, C, and they were each person in the whole firm was tagged to see whether they were allowed to work from home or work from office or work from client location, and only if absolutely required they were asked to go. Otherwise, most people had to work from home as well. Now, we revisited this every week when we opened the office, and there's an app that the office quickly made, and we all had to have that app downloaded and with the status of which league we belong to and what is our status, as in it's work from home or work from office or work from client. The guard would actually check it and only then let us come in. Otherwise, we wouldn't be allowed to go into the office. And obviously, the office went through a very different way of seating, of using the cafeteria, using our breakout areas, or meeting rooms, etc. We were not sitting in our own desk. We were sitting in a designated area only. There were some seats which were not allowed to be sit on. So there was a lot of very detailed planning that went into it, and it was just phenomenal. It was done very smoothly and done really well. The new hires were, frankly, the offers that we had made were honored. In fact, there were some people who had finished their notice period in the previous organizations and were waiting to join. So as soon as they could have joined, they were made to join. And for people who couldn't get a laptop, then some virtual onboarding arrangements were made as well. There was a lot more greater employee connect, and this is, I think, one of the biggest advantages I see out of this unprecedented situation, that while employee connect was very important earlier, the extent of employee connect increased quite a lot now, because managers were calling regularly to the teams and asking, is everything okay? Are you mentally okay? Do you need any kind of help, personal support? Otherwise, anything, the employee connect had improved so much, not just with the teams, but also as a firm. There was a lot of leadership communication coming out very, very regularly, keeping us completely updated with what was happening, what the status was, where are we heading. There was very little ambiguity, and the way the firm was handling it, that was really commendable. Of course, there were a lot of dynamic work models. There was not just work from home and work from clients, but also, for example, we created some availability visibility for our member firms outside. So, for example, if they were talking to a client and if they saw people available in India, they could pass on the work to us. So, we were increasing our scope to different member firms as well, so that there could be better optimizing and better sharing of resources and better sharing of skills as well. I just said that we honored all the offers that we had made. So there was nobody who was, even the campus will be onboarded. So everybody was brought in. There was a lot more focused bench management. There were a lot of initiatives and a lot of internal work that people were volunteering to. The people, it had become like a mission to keep people occupied, it to become more focused with what you do when you when you're on bench and you're trying to do research for newer ways. But there was a lot of the leadership had a lot of meetings where they actually went through various sectors, various industries, of what they can do now in the coming times, of how they can present our solutions, our services that we provide in a different way, in a way that works better for them. So there was ample discussion where a lot of focus was also on people to handle how to handle bench. There was a lot of rewards and recognition, obviously, because we were, people were stretching, and there was a lot of valuable impact coming on, which otherwise, would have been just a regular work that you do. Okay, I do something XYZ and I come back. But the impact it was having, especially for teams which were working in the background, especially for teams which were stretched quite a lot. And frankly, everybody was working a lot, and working from home has its advantages, but also a disadvantage that you're always connected and you're never really stopping to work. You get up, you see your mails, you sleep, you see your mails, and that can get overwhelming. And increased personal support. So there was a lot of connect, like I said, but also a lot of trainings and a lot of sessions that we had for the family. That there was every morning a yoga session was conducted every morning. It goes on even today, where you and your family can sit and participate. It's a yoga and meditation session which is done virtually for everybody. And this is just one example. There were various such examples. A lot of counseling sessions as well. So a lot of personal support was there as well. Of course, we had to do more. We had to optimize. We had to include everyone. Now, when I say include everyone, there were teams which were earlier usually not tapped into functions like the front desk, because usually a receptionist sitting in the front is like your face to the firm, right? She's really, really important. But at this point in time, when there was nobody going to office, what could they do? And we have so many offices, so many floors, we have so many people. Even the travel desk, nobody was traveling, or secretaries, there was very limited thing that the work that was happening for them. But these support systems were also tapped into. They were, encouraged to reskill or upscale and volunteer for other opportunities within the firm. And everybody was very open to considering taking them on, as long as there was some certain basics that they met. People were very willing and open to trying to give them an opportunity internally. There were some ideation challenges and initiatives where it was, people came up with various new ideas and new initiatives that they could work on, which really helped us, brainstorm of newer ways that we can handle a situation like this. And that really helped us come up with some bright ideas. Counseling and engaging mind-body initiatives. Counseling had actually become the need of the hour. A lot of people were going through a lot of frustration. We've also heard otherwise that these are not the best times for mental health as well. So we have an internal helpline for counseling. But there were a lot of sessions and a lot of trainings conducted, which were also very helpful at this point in time. There were, while there was so much support and there was so much, opportunities available, there were some areas where we tightened the discipline to a very large extent. There were areas of no compromise, that certain things had to be done without a compromise. Some of them was time tracking. So, this could probably come as a surprise for non-consulting firms or non-professional services firms, because it's a given that you track time. But in a firm like ours, where our assets are people and we actually sell time, it all boils down to the rate per hour. So you sell time. This had become very, very key, because even by mistake, we did not want people to miss tracking their timesheets or clocking time on their timesheets. There was a lot more focus, there was more discipline put, some implications as well. So that had become an area of no compromise suddenly. Not suddenly, as in there was there was no scope of a default. Avoiding delays due to documentation. Now, this can be typical sometimes. There can be delays of creating project codes to track time on, because maybe say the client did not sign a document, we didn't have a particular document, he was traveling, or a compliance was not finished, etc. those things had to be now, there were really no scope for increasing the aging for that. So we had to really bring them down to next to nothing. So utilization for project delays. Now, for example, if a project was getting delayed or extensions were happening and people had to change the allocation of work more, or they were going to start later, and this was a real situation where it was happening across groups, where they were expected to start on a certain date, but they were actually starting later because of the lack of clarity from the client as to when will it start, or when will the work happen, or when will the documents be signed, etc. We made sure that there was utilization provided. They were tracking correctly the time, and it was not just, okay, I didn't track time, I forgot, but those things were not happening. So utilization were provided in all situations. Data accuracy had become really, really critical. Our schedules were, so we usually have a 90% plus accuracy, but we now had a lot more, and every particular project that was going to come, what was their, funding, or how much, how many people were required in the project, what was the fee, what was the budget, etc., etc. Everything was really fine-tuned. It's not like these things were not there, but we went down to the last decimal, that everything had to be fine-tuned. There was one source for the reports. Somebody saying something? Okay. So source of truth. We didn't want reports coming from different systems, so we wanted only coming from one system, and that is why we changed that. Partial staffing. So, sometimes people would say, okay, I don't think I need the person full time. Maybe I'll just take 20%, 40%, etc. But we wanted to reduce that and say that you try, instead of taking 2-3 people in the project, try and take one person full time versus reducing, versus having partial staffing, because we can allocate those hours to a different project. Now there was a lot more approval matrix. I mean, we had a multi-level approval matrix for deviations. If somebody was not doing as expected, or somebody wanted more, there was no funding, but the project was going on, there were more people being added, etc., etc. So it's not like it wasn't happening, but there had to be a very genuine reason with multiple approvals in place. And of course, there was a lot more effective analysis happening from what was budgeted versus what was actual, where were we standing in reality, and what were we forecasting, and how far are we from forecasting. So week on week, we were comparing it and trying to bring down a number of variants. And that's it. I'm done. Actually, I'm not going to go on for long. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take. Shiva, over to you. Shiva, are you there?
Thanks, Radhika, for very detailed presentation on KPMG strategy and processes, especially leading practices on central WFM processes. It's really very good, amazing. Let's see that, like how many of them have questions. I'd requested participants to raise your hand if you have any questions. Chat window, there's one question from, Chandrasekhar is asking question about reskilling, reskilling, upskilling. Primarily, whose responsibility is it? Employee, employer?
Sorry, can you please repeat the
He's asking a question. Reskilling and upskilling, and also cross-skilling. Is this responsibility of employees or employers?
No, obviously employers, but there has to be intent from the employees. So, I mean, we don't want to force it down on somebody where there is no intent also. At the same time, business first. So if it makes sense that those skills are reskillable, and I mean, they are, or upskillable, then why not? But for sure, I mean, it has to be in tandem with both. Nobody wants to force things down on people.
All right, we have one question from Abo. Abo Baker. Hi, Abo.
Hi,
Go
hi.
ahead. Hi.
Yeah, I lead the workforce management technology for DXE. So the question I had is a bench management. That is the science by itself. The bench management, it's a science by itself because you have runoff, you have roll off, you have 7 people terminating. So how do you really get a good visibility of this demand supply?
How do we get up for the visibility of the demands?
Yeah, the supply. The good foresight of the supply.
Yeah, so see, we do a very detailed demand supply analysis, okay, and we do this very, very regularly. Every fortnight we do this. So, I mean, the regular bench data anyway comes every week, but this gap analysis, as we call it, the demand supply gap analysis, that's key in actually deciding how we will be utilizing or getting more headcount or not getting headcount or whatever, what kind of projects we can pitch for, when we can pitch for it, what time we can pitch for, etc., etc. So we have a system that we follow. We have a tool internally which we developed, but at the same time it's a lot about discipline. So now, after quite a lot of pushing, our systems are very reliable in the sense that we put in our client information, our expected pipeline information, and then we map it to our supply. So we have the pipeline saying this kind of scale, this kind of headcount, this kind of timeline, matching to what kind of supply we have available. But at the same time, a trend of attrition and these times very limited hiring, promotions if possible or if at all. So mapping all of that, there is a probability percentage that we have, and there is a percentage of forecast that we do from a shortage versus idle capacity. So with that kind of thing, we fairly have an idea, and for that matter, we match that to our actual funding or actual revenue that's coming in. So, and we also match it to our utilization for time tracking. So it all goes hand in hand. So if we feel that our we're forecasting, but if the revenue is not coming, see, it's sometimes we could be stuck with a genuine thing that's different, but if it's not coming, then it's no point, right? So that's done very.
Okay, got it. Yep, I think we do almost the same here. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Radhika.
Radhika.
Hi.
I think we have. Hi,
Hi,
someone is asking.
this is Prachi. Good evening. I asked my previous question to you on the panel, and thank you so much for acknowledging it so well. So here's another question, or rather not question, but suggestions that I would like to have from your maybe experience as an RM lead about how and what should be innovated and automated in RM seeing the current situations. So that we could be well equipped for the new variances that we're going to see in the process, and what you walked us through the slides.
Sure. What should be automated? Everything. But how should we automate it, and what should you start with? I think one of the key, most important things is to have your repository in place, and a decent, accurate repository which has your skills, which has your resumes, which has your experience, and depending on what you use for your business, okay, depending on what kind of allocation system you use, because each industry is different, right? So that repository is your number one thing, because that is something that you need to rely on. If you don't have that accurate information, you will never be able to respond to a client who will ask you to prove it to me. How can you do this work? I want the firm to do XYZ work, but do you have the expertise? Do you have that capability? How do you do that? With some kind of repository that you have, which is reliable. Okay, that's one. That is first thing that you should automate. And when I say automate, it obviously has a fair bit of manual intervention where the employee himself or herself goes and updates details. But largely there can be a lot of information can be pre-populated from your internal systems like your HR or your status, or if there's somebody's left or exited, then that information can flow into that page, so that you know that this person is somebody I don't need to look into. The resume can be digitized completely instead of having a manual sheet, that because I remember when we first started, we used to have Word doc or PPTs that you had to upload in a standard format for a resume. Now we would maintain that exercise and ask people to upload it every 6 and 9 months. But having said that, people may just upload a blank CV or a blank template. How would you know? How would the system know whether it's accurate or not? To manage that, we digitized the whole resume process. So now there was no way of somebody bypassing and saying, oh, I have done it and stuff like that. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is, of course, getting your pipeline information in system very accurately. And number three is to automate all your reports. And I can't stress enough on how important that is, because you may have the systems, but the analysis, if the analysis is not coming out right or in time, or it's taking too much time to do it manually, and the mistakes are happening, because at the end of the day, if you do something manually, there will be some errors. It's actually useless. I mean, you may have done excellent work, but you can't showcase it, then what's the point? So these are three key areas that require automation, absolutely, and integration. You need to integrate with all internal systems, not even one you need to leave out.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks, Prachi. I think, Radhika, we have a couple of questions, so probably I would facilitate offline with you. Rajaram, I'll have your question facilitated with Radhika offline on phone. Interest of time, because a couple of other speakers have got meeting with your US counterpart, so they are also going to join in panel discussion. In interest of time, what we do is we'll conclude this. Thank you so much, Radhika, for your lovely presentation.
Radhika, deepest gratitude. Thank you so much.
You.
So lucid, so lucid. Beautiful.
Thank you. Bye-bye.